Hello, everybody. Yeah, we are finally here to talk with you about the situation in Colombia. We are really excited to let you know what is happening there, and we are really happy that you are all of you are here, and that you are so interesting to hear us and to know what is the situation there, the political situation, and yeah. We want to start?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us here. We are very excited to talk about Colombia, and we have three parts in this presentation. The first part is like a background from before the national strike. The second one is how it emerges and the development of the national strike. And the last one would be like the current situation in the country. Yeah, so we'll start with the presentation.
And then, yeah, if you have questions, maybe should we do it everything in the end? And then
I would say, yeah, at the end there are questions from our friends here, and
take notice, and then
Exactly. Many thanks again for tuning in, and we hope we all enjoy this journey through the story and the current situation of political and social movements in Colombia. As our first point, firstly, we would like to introduce a little bit of historical context. What has been happening since the 28th of April, which is seen as the beginning of the social uproar in Colombia. We all, I mean, maybe we will not know, but in the end, the 28th of April is the beginning of a very strong national strike in the whole country of Colombia, which means initially people stop working, people stop going to school, and start organizing on the streets, start creating different tools in order to sort out political and social demands. Firstly, the 20th of April is the day in which massively millions of Colombians from different regions in all cities started to go to the streets and speak against a tax reform that was announced by the government weeks before the 28th of April. So several social organizations called for a national strike, for national protests in the most important cities of the country, and even in rural areas. Exactly. Before that, it's very important to mention that the 21st of November from the year 2019, there was a very strong movement, a parallel movement, comparable to the one that started on the 28th of April of this year. The 21st of November, a general strike was also called upon the streets of Colombia for different reasons. Some of the demands that are currently spoken about and currently put on the table for the government and or for the state to respond nowadays started 2 years ago in November the 21st. For instance, public education, universities and the like should be much more attended. There should be much more resources to be much more resources for public education. Hundreds of social leaders, so-called social leaders, have been murdered in the past years. Until November 2019, there was around 300 people who were killed by paramilitary forces or even by the state. People live in misery, which is already a good reason to go to the streets and demand for justice, social justice. And it is also very important to remember that Colombia is a country in which almost every year or every every semester, most of the times, there are national or even local or regional strikes going on. 2018, very important to know, is the year in which the current president, Iván Duque, assumed to be the president of Colombia. But for that, to that point, it's quite important to remember that his charge as a president was much criticized, even by state agents, even by other state actors, like for the fact that it was much, it has strong links with blood money, money from drug exports and other corrupt and violent ways of acquiring power. Also, from the year 2002 to 2010, the president of Colombia was the very well-known Álvaro Uribe Vélez. From that point, the story of Colombia includes the fact of paramilitarism, so to say, the beginning of a political figure, which emphasizes, socially represents and socially emphasizes this idea of a strong man who is in charge of a nation, comparable to what's happening in other countries, which is pretty much simple to associate it with fascist tendencies, such as what we see in Brazil with Bolsonaro, or even Donald Trump in the United States, and much more. So 2002 is more or less the year in which this political project, extreme right wing, starts to reign the country of Colombia till 2018, which is the beginning of the current presidency. Right. In the end, one of the most important things we've got to mention is in order to understand the full context of the national strike, is the colonial history of Colombia. Such as other countries in the region, Colombia was invaded and plundered by the Spanish since the beginning of the 16th century. Many of them attracted by the legend of El Dorado, this amazing land where everything should be made of gold. So many Europeans were attracted by this idea of this the land where everything is materially acquirable. That brought genocide to our country, or to what was supposed to be our country, and the establishment of settler colonies. Coloniality begins at this period of history, 15th century, which is something we will point out as long as throughout the presentation. Who's got the power? How power relationships were established in this century, in the beginning of the 15th century, beginning of the 16th century, and who accumulates, who produces all these power relationships based on economical production were founded in the beginning of this invasion from Europe, from whole Europe to our continent. So all of these different moments of the history, of current history, kind of shape the way the Colombian people have been not only organizing, but also resisting. And how is it that we are, since the 16th century, we've been fighting back, resisting, and creating ways to restart our lives and to throw out the people who have been plundering us for hundreds of years. Now, the general strike from April 2021, the one we were talking about, we see it as a continuation of anti-colonial struggles from the 16th century, as long as all these other moments in the current history.
Well, So the second part is just exactly what happened, why is the national strike in Colombia, which are the reasons and the development of this strike. Yeah, so if people protest in the middle of a pandemic, it's because the government is more dangerous than the virus. So why was a general strike called? Amid the third peak of the corona pandemic, Colombia faces to the longest and most destructive mass protest in recent history. The protests, which began, as my friends say, on April 28, 2021, so this year, were triggered by a tax reform bill proposed by the government to stabilize public debts and fiscal deficit. So Colombia, like other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, has hit hard by the corona pandemic, and in 2020, its economy contracted, like went extremely down. So that's like affecting the livelihoods of millions of people. So to address this situation, the Colombian government undertook a series of emergency actions in 2020. It increased public spending to strengthen the healthcare system, to assist vulnerable populations, and to help business remain afloat. As a result, the fiscal deficit rose from 3.2% of gross domestic product in 2019 to 7.8% in 2020. So it was really a huge urgency. And so the president Iván Duque, he proposed this tax reform to improve Colombia's fiscal situation by raising nearly $6.4 million. So the reform will have been introduced to expand funding to Ingreso Solidario. That is a universal basic income social program established in April 2020 to provide relief during the COVID-19 pandemic in Colombia. Of course, most of Colombians, probably 80%, are tired of it and oppose the bill, as well as many political parties and leaders. And notwithstanding this urgency of addressing Colombia's fiscal situation, a tax hike on top of the corona lockdowns led many to conclude that the approach was not well timed. Also, the issue of this tax initiative was that the initiative will have increased taxes for the middle and lower classes, affecting one more time most of a vulnerable population. This is unfortunately also not the first time that this happened, that the tax reform affect just the vulnerable people, and the rich stay rich. So as a result, and out of fear of further spread of corona, led by national strike committees, labor unionists, Afro-Colombians, indigenous communities, LGBTQ people, students, and activist groups, thousands to tens of thousands of Colombians took to the streets on April 28 to protest against the long-standing repression and the politics of the far-right government and the economic reforms planned by the president Iván Duque. How was it? So from the beginning, although the demonstrations have been actually peaceful, it was also a huge cultural and artist way to protest. Amazing what the people did and are doing on the street, dancing and making a lot of art in the street, protesting in a very peaceful way. But the repression was so strong that it resulted in violent clashes between protesters and police forces. And in the first day, unfortunately, resulting at least 6 deaths. On the second day of the national strike, Duque announced that he will not withdraw the reform. By the third day, he was ready to replace for some of the more controversial points. And but the protest, of course, continue and growing. And the third day was the first May International Workers' Day, and it was a huge protest. What it was that day. On the 5th day of the protest, the president withdrew finally the entire project, and later the finance minister Alberto Carrasquilla resigned as a supporter of the criticized plan. So that was a very, very nice news somehow. But of course, the people was very uncomfortable still, because, it was not really, they were afraid also to stop the protest, because they wanted to really reach like a real change, no? So exactly. So despite the government was modifying the bill on April 30 and moving it in May 2, protests continued and expanded. They include pre-existing grievances, many exacerbated by the pandemic, and becoming a broad call for improvement in other areas. So what is the general strike demanding? First of all, the protesters are voiced discontent over growing inequality. There's a very huge inequality in Colombia, deficient public service, the slow implementation of the 2016 peace agreement between the Colombian government and the Revolutionary Armed Force of Colombia, the FARC, and kept government promises to vulnerable communities, political and social violence. As many of us know, Colombia is one of the most dangerous places. If you want to make activism, you can just, of course, get killed there. So the people was so voiced all of this, the corruption, the increases of organized crime, and of course the new reforms. Unless these and other underlying issues are addressed, social and political tensions are likely to continue. So we don't know when it's, of course, it has to be a change. So otherwise, until now, some of the cities, they are the protests are since 28 till now continually. But in another places in Colombia, they make a stop some days and then start again, and however, Duque claims that a new reform has been formulated. He insists that a tax reform is supposedly needed to fill the state funding holes, heightened by the health emergency, and to ensure the expansions of the social programs he has created to deal with the pandemic. But of course, the folk was afraid, as I said, to stop the protest. And as an indigenous leader, Aida Kilku said something that I guess every Colombian people thought is that he withdrew, but with the sole aim to restructuring it. And the restructuring could be much more dangerous than the one that already existed. And that is actually not that far away from the reality from Colombia. That's already happened. That the people go to the street, protest against any reform. They withdrew the reform, the government, but after that, in the end, what they did was just reformulated, like, I don't know, use another terms, another names, and in the end it's exactly the same thing or even worse. why is a structural change in the police force demanded? Yeah, public violence has rekindled the debate about police reform in Colombia. The number of victims of government repression during the strike is increasing every day, and the numbers published by the government don't match at all with those of NGOs. According, for example, with these NGOs, Temblores, there are a total of 4,285 cases of police violence, and that was in April. Unfortunately, I was researching the last what is like the actual numbers, and I couldn't find really good information now. There is I don't know, a lot of disinformation, and the media is I think that's about the police. And as I said about the disconfirmation with them, that the government doesn't really complete I don't know,
respect
respect the pact, the peace pact. And actually, since this peace pact or peace agreement, many people they were killed. The people that they of these guerrillas, they gave their weapons, and they were killed in the end. So what was this peace agreement? So finally, to I don't know this, well, finally this one, and then I say the last words. Europe and the USA also play an important role in the Colombia's conflict for, I can't wait a second. An important role in Colombia's conflict. For instance, it has already been proven that many of the weapons used by the Colombian police come from Germany. Such equipments and has been transported to Mexico, Brazil, or Colombia, countries with multiple violations to human rights. So every single day that passes of a pandemic is really bad for the countries in global South. Now, pandemic plus almost 4 months of protest, I guess it is impossible for all of us to imagine how bad are doing the people down there in underdeveloped countries.
So, okay, I think that's my turn. I want to talk about what's the relation about this national strike and anarchy, because we are in this event, Global Anarchy. And I want to use this topic also to start the conversation with our friends here, as well as our friends watching us, because that's my personal view and our view also, but I think it's more interesting if we talk with you about what's happening in Colombia and how it's related with anarchy. I think one of the most difficult parts for us to prepare to get ready for this discussion today is like this kind of so many levels in the Colombian conflict, because if you start talking about colonialism, you have to talk about the elites which are still governing us, and if you talk about those elites, you have to talk about drug dealing, you have to talk about paramilitarism, you have to talk about the Plan Colombia from the United States, the responsibility from the German government, and the responsibility from the European Union. So it's most of the time it's very difficult like to have a complete perspective or a complete view of what's happening in Colombia. But seeing what happened in this last national strike, we think there are some like ideals which are not maybe present in the everyday discourse of the people and in the everyday slogans of the people, but they are there. And if we go back to the anarchist theory, to the most basic of the anarchism, we see this, the idea of anarchism is a society or more societies where everyone is free and there are no systems of domination and exploitation. And of course, that's really hard to reach. That's I think a very an everyday task for the political organization. But I think the social movements and the people participating in the national strike in Colombia is starting to realize that they are more or less organizing in an anarchistic way. So, for example, the first point of the horizontal and non-hierarchical organization, if we see examples like like the first line or the front line, this is people who started to protest with all the other people normally, pacifically, and because of the repression of the state, because of the repression of the police and the military, they start to organize and say, okay, we are the first line and we are going to protect the people demonstrating, because we know we are at risk, because we know we can get killed, because we know we can get in the prison. And that's for me and for us in our discussion like one of the most strong evidences for anarchist organization. Also the fact, for example, of coming together, of gathering, the people gathering of the, on the streets, the people talking about politics, talking about the future, talking about the government, talking about democracy, everything. I mean, that's like political organization from the very base. And that was not planned and was not guided like any person or any institutional organization. That was people getting together, neighbors getting together, the family talking about that. And I think that's like one of the biggest and more strongest success of the people taking the streets. And one last point, and or two last points. Your struggle is my struggle, and that's the recognition of people in Colombia, maybe people in big cities that recognized and are recognizing that, for example, what indigenous people are fighting for is also something. For me, is also something to fight for, yeah. And there is no liberation in any way if the other ones are not being liberated. And this recognition that the struggles of the others are also our struggles is, for me, for us, other point of anarchism playing a role in the Colombia organization and in this national strike. And the last one for me is very important, and we try to show you that in our presentation, beside the text and the things we wrote. And this is this explosion of art in so many ways. For example, people taking the streets, the public space, to paint some wall, to dance, to make some music, to just to talk. And this explosion of art is like one of the strongest ways to fight against repression that people in Colombia are using right now. And I think that's very interesting, because people are like realizing, and there is this like this, yeah, I don't know what to say that, but some say if we talk, we are going to be killed. If we doesn't talk, we are also to be killed. So we talk, and we are going to talk, and we are going to do it loud, and we are going to make things change. And that's for us like one of the strongest expression of anarchism and anarchistic organization in the national strike from the last year, and it's until now happening. So yeah, that was like our initial presentation. So our friends have some questions, and I think the public can also participate and ask questions if they want.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, this also this movement.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
Maybe the last thing I would like to say is people keeping like statues from very
Amazing.
old heroes, and that has been amazing. That's like a phenomenon not just taking place in Colombia, but everywhere in the world where this colonialism and coloniality have been taking place. And in Colombia it was, and it is still happening until now. And I think it's one way of show this struggle and this this fight against colonialism and the capitalist model of life. Yeah.
El paro no para. The strike doesn't stop.
I see. Okay.
Right. Ja.
Du siehst den Chat selbst, ne?
Ach so, stimmt. Ja.
Wenn die Fragen sind, sind sie im Chat. Da müssen Sie selber einmal aufgehen.
Das man dann.
So if someone has some question, you can write it in the chat. So
Firstly, maybe firstly begin with the questions the comrade has prepared.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
So,
Okay, what's going on there?
yeah.
Okay, first of all, thank you for showing up. These were my questions, but your speech was so wide, so I have to. You already answered most of my questions, but there are some left. Police and special forces killed many people and hurt many people. On the other hand, start people going to arm themselves, because I think Colombia is a state full of weapons from everywhere, even from Germany, of course. Do the people start to arm themselves to fight the police, for example?
That's a very good question, actually. You have something to say?
Yeah, the issue is Colombia is a country struck by armed violence.
Yeah.
So majority of people are not quite excited about the fact of speaking about weapons.
Yeah.
Or getting armed. So in the first place, most of the Colombian people would reject that in the first place. On the other hand, elections and candidates for next year. Next year is in August. The Colombian people would probably they will meet another president. So many people find and seek refuge in the possibility of another candidate, which will, according to the mainstream discourse, will be able to sort out the problems of the different problems that were described.
I see. Okay.
So, in fact, the strength of this protest, the social, the legitimation that it's got, comes from the fact that it's a peaceful protest, artistic protest.
Okay.
But at the same time, the fact of weapons coming into play is something that is always around the corner.
I see. Okay.
Not only because there is a lot of weapons, but because the violence from the state is always going to be there. So who knows? I mean, in the end, it's not granted. I'm not taking it for granted.
Okay, I see.
But in the end, at the moment, I would say things that have been seen, people are not. It's not the first option.
Sounds really cool.
Unfortunately, I have to say that, of course, there is people that they take advantage of it, criminal organizations that take advantage of, okay, the country is now in chaos, I gonna do what I want to do, or vandalism as is. But I think the real protest is of course peaceful, but of course there is everything, and that's actually a huge problem, because every single day that passed from the protest is also a huge loss of billions of for the economy of Colombia, because they have this, what is the name? I mean, the transport of goods and service,
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
flowing of the people, the exports can't go out from the country.
Right.
The huge, one of the most important ports from Colombia in Pacific, from Buenaventura, is closed,
Cool.
like more than 1 month, and that makes billions of lost stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's also the huge criticism
Yeah.
to the government, because
They're losing so much money and money.
and they don't show any interest to negotiate, to go to the agenda, to meet the people, the committee, the National Strike Committee, all the people. They are calling the government, and slowly they are doing somehow, but it's not enough. It's completely not enough. And of course, then the people doesn't gonna stop if they are not happy with the change. And the people who go to the street, they are also the people who doesn't have any to lose. The people who already construct something, and they have a kind of good job and a kind of good place to live. So they are scared to go out to protest, because they don't want to lose the
small
things that they already get.
Right.
So the people who go to the streets, the people who doesn't have anything to lose, because if I don't have anything to eat at home, at least in the protest, they are huge of cooks, community kitchen, and then I can eat there, and I feel part of a collective.
Actually, I would like to add something, because talking about like violence in Colombia, you have to be like very careful, but also understand why. If you see, our history is a very, very violent one. I think in the last 200 years, we haven't had any kind of a year without political violence, and that's the way that political violence has been done in Colombia. And that's also because of, for example, the ingerence of the United States in the Colombian conflict, the development of the guerrillas. But actually, talking about violence is also talking about a privilege. And if you say the people are protesting like are very pacific when they are protesting, but looking at, or like I don't know how to say, but looking at the cruelty of the political, the police and the military forces, it obliged some people to defend themselves. And of course, like the difference in the kind of arms used is huge, but there are some people who it has been obliged to respond to this violence, of course, with other kind of violence. And
that's the classical way.
Exactly. But it's
that's
so
why I'm
cruelty.
asking.
For example, this riot brigade from the police, they are using this weapon called venom. That's a new weapon. I think that that's
scary.
That's from the United States. You can find it in the videos online. If you give Colombia venom, smart, and that's like I don't know, like a small thing. Shooting.
It's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle like shooting a lot of gas, a lot of munition, like live munition, but also not live munition.
Rubber bullets.
Exactly. You see, like this cruelty the political forces are using against people. So I think at the end, after this peace process, after the whole things the people in Colombia has been facing in the last 20 years. It's very difficult to talk about violence, but the people have been obliged to use violence in some way. That's the situation. I think that most people doesn't want to do it, but it's a question of privilege.
Of course.
And actually, the last point of this I found really interesting. This what I read. I didn't know it. But in contrast to other countries, the police in Colombia are part of the Ministry of Defense and
Really?
are supposed to have been trained. They are supposed to have been trained in the fight against armed conflict, especially against the guerrillas. So they are really armed.
Yeah.
And of course, the folk, we don't have nothing.
Yeah,
So we are
yeah,
really fighting with art somehow. And they
simply can't call anybody. Okay. Okay.
So of course, yeah, they of course, so many people already were killed.
The FARC or the rest of or the civilized FARC, does they play a role in this actual protest?
Well, I
Sorry,
would like
because
to start.
the point is why I'm asking is I think every political wait a good resistance in Colombia was traditionally always hierarchical. You know, there's a chief, or the communist parties had a leader, and the guerrilla had some leaders. How do they act nowadays according to the riots there? Do they play a role, or
That's also another really nice question. Really important.
I would like to start maybe. The role of the FARC. Well, actually, the FARC started this process, which led to the peace agreement in 2016.
yeah.
The FARC has a history of 50 years of resistance. And the most of the people were peasants, and there were like a professionalization in some way of the guerrilla group.
Yeah.
And at the end, the government had to say or to accept, okay, we have to negotiate.
Yeah.
This is going to be like an eternal war.
Yeah.
We keep doing like that. Yeah. That was on the government of Juan Manuel Santos.
Mm-hmm.
And he became this
Nobel
Prize of Peace because of
with
that.
his white skirt.
Which is also like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
What I want to say is, of course, I think the FARC is playing now a role, because the agreement was, okay, we give up our guns,
Yeah.
and we become, or we get some kind of political participation.
Yeah. As a party like this, huh?
Yeah, they wanted to form a party, but not just like beyond that. They wanted to have like the possibility to some kind of economic enterprises, education, like this place in the society they're asking for. And the problem is the government has not been respecting these agreements. Yeah. For example, the FARC reported last time like 380 from the fighters or ex-combatants who has been killed in these last 5 years. So if they are playing a role, I think the role they are playing right now is like finding more or less political participation, but also finding the way to not get killed. And that's, of course, very hard to get politically organized.
Yeah, of course.
You have to be aware, or if you have to have fear for your life, you are not going to be able to find this place for political participation. That's what I think. And that's very sad, because that's not the first time it happens. It happened with another party also came in from the guerrilla, and that was like in the 80s, the Unión Patriótica. And from them were more like 5,000 members, victims also from the paramilitary and the military group. So is the question, is this happening again? Is this going to happen until anyone from the guerrilla group still living? I think that's an open question, at least for me. I don't know if you want to say something else.
Yeah, mainly the question of how and who does influence how the general strike, the national strike is being carried out. I'd say at this point it's very important to mention this is a plain popular movement. It is the people who's on the streets. It is not the political parties. It is not any conformed and official political organization. Political organization has been formed from the basis, which means there's many people and many organizations, armed or not armed, who are looking for the support, or who were at least looking for the support, this popular support that's been building on the streets. But it's very important to emphasize, it is nobody who's funding these people on the streets.
Mm-hmm,
It is nobody who's paying them. There's nobody. There's no, as I said, no political party, no guerrilla group that's behind them.
People's movement.
They're trying to influence it in a certain way. Political parties are also trying to.
Yeah.
Some certain, not, of course, not all. But in the end, the resistance carried out by people nowadays in the streets is fully on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas, the new things that have been created, the assemblies that have been celebrated,
Mm-hmm.
the debates on the streets,
Yeah.
on the neighborhoods, it's all by the count of them.
Yeah.
It's pure popular organization from the basis. That is very important to mention. That
Cool. Yes. The churches, do they play? What kind of role do they play?
The church.
The churches, Catholic Church or the whatever.
Well, actually, I think like 80, well, let's say 80%, but 85% of the population in Colombia is Catholic.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And there is this new phenomenon from Christian churches.
Yeah, I know.
Like more or less like in Brazil.
Yes, but elsewhere, Brazil, it must be really, really, really big.
Yeah.
It must be really big. I read an article about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Colombia is not that big, but they are very radical.
Yeah. Okay.
And just as in Brazil and other parts of the world, they are against, for example, against the abortion rights, against rights for LGBTI plus people, and so on. So if you see, of course, I think, of course, they are playing some kind of role, but the very interesting thing in this national strike is that young people are like taking the initiative. They are leading this movement.
Okay.
And more, and the most of them are very critical. I'm not going to say they don't believe in God or they don't believe in some kind of things from the Catholic Church, but they are very critical and they are not like taking everything for granted, or are not taking like the Bible for granted, and so on. So I hope that in the future, in the next years, the role played by the Catholic and the other kind of churches is going to diminish. But I think nowadays they still play a role in the conservative side. Of politics.
Okay.
That way.
I think also the role is in the end exactly the role in every single country in the world that is like what is the name of this actually?
Okay.
Cruzar medio brazos.
You're doing nothing.
Like just.
I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Just this and wait until some kind of God come and clean all my what I did here.
Yeah.
So how? I have like my family is pretty religious and they don't participate in any political. They don't vote.
I see. Okay.
They don't want to have anything to do with political.
Yeah, I see.
But it's stupid. But anyway, so they are really it's really bad, no? In the end, the role they are making everything much more slower and much more difficult.
Yeah, difficult.
A lot of people, doesn't take part of it.
Not to mention that, just quickly, that at the same time, the churches primarily represent one of the most conservative sectors of society, no doubt. At the same time, Colombia and some other countries of the region have shown the creation in the 60s, the creation of the theology of liberation if
yes, yes, yes.
if you don't know it, give it a look, give it a quick look.
Yeah.
Those are Catholic priests who embodied and interpreted the message of the Bible and the message of a good Christian in a political way, which led them to arm themselves,
right,
and fight for the poor, fight for the sick, fight for all these things that Jesus and all these things, all these virtues, Christian virtues that are remarked in Jesus' life. The theology of liberation put them in a political context, which led to direct action against the source of poverty, of sickness, of oppression. And as you told, for a fact, these front lines, which also you could see some, maybe if people are kind of familiar with the uproar in Chile, they know the first liners, right? These people who build up out of simple metals, they build up enormous shields to protect themselves from live munition or from real munition. And there were several kinds of frontliners. There were students, there were moms, there were musicians, and there was an ecumenic frontline.
An economic frontline.
Ecumenic,
really?
Exactly. Several kind of priests. Mainly Catholic priests in the city of Cali. They went to the streets to defend people in the front line. Frontliners.
Okay.
Yeah, you could see them. There are interviews there if you're interested.
Yeah.
And that was something very interesting about the history of Colombia. There's as well as there's this Catholic, this extremely conservative right-wing Catholic sectors. At the same time, there is at least a minority of believers, of Catholic believers who, and priests who lead a political fight, who lead a critical politic, a radical politic based on direct action and social justice.
Okay.
Actually, I have to talk about the last remaining guerrilla group in Colombia, the ALN.
Yeah.
They were grounded, or I don't know what's the name, like founded. Thank you. Founded by Camilo Torres. He was a priest, a Catholic priest. So there is still this influence from this radical or more progressive view of the Catholic virtues and values. And the thing is, they are armed, the ELN, but behind this violence, this political violence, are like this kind of interpretation of the Bible, of the life of Jesus and so on.
Okay.
But it's still, for me, also like a very small group of thinkers and people willing to change the situation in Colombia.
Okay, it means necessary.
Yeah.
And most the young people.
In Germany, we called this Befreiungskirche. And I didn't know that that's still existing. I knew it from the 60s and 70s, but okay. Befreiungstheologie, that's what was the right word,
Theology of liberation.
Yeah. You answered all my questions before you. And the drug gangs who play a major role in Colombian history, and the youngest, do they still play a role in this kind of riots? Because the regular drug lord wants to make his business in silence, and if the business is running well, okay. But do they work together with the police or whatever? Okay,
well,
I'm sorry for.
No, it's
answer is yes.
Yes. There's
okay.
If you look, drug dealing is one of the most or the best business in the world.
Yeah, of course.
And Colombia was the last year one of the biggest producers of cocaine in the world. So if you connect dots, who are doing what, is allowing what, and so on, you see that the political elites in Colombia are the one getting benefits from the narco traffic.
Right.
There is no other explanation.
Okay.
I just say hashtag Matarife. I mean, that's a new series from journalists in Colombia.
Yeah.
I think it's just in Spanish, but well, I don't know. But if you want to understand what has been happening in the last 30 years, even including the history, for example, from Pablo Escobar, it's just the continuation of that. Yeah. And when I knew people, and I say I'm from Colombia, not everyone, but
nearly
a lot
everyone.
of people thinking that's funny. The first thing they are saying is, "Oh, Escobar, oh, narco."
Yeah.
And they think that's like I don't know, like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But if you think Escobar was doing something great or something big, you have to see the history, for example, from Álvaro Uribe, who is like the biggest drug dealer in the world right now. Yeah, I think that the other ones are like the Taliban's with opium. Exactly. But what's related to cocaine, it's Colombia like the first producent and the biggest producer and trafficker, and the elites in Colombia are getting the whole benefits of it. I mean, ignoring that is like you are interpreting everything wrong from the Colombian process.
Exactly.
That's the reason why we laugh, because everything in Colombia is like related to drugs, if you want to see that. If you see the last 20 years of economics, the only reason why Colombia is still being a country is because of the money coming from the drug trafficking. That's how I see it. I don't know if my comrades see it in other way, but that's for me like the only explanation. But because we don't produce anything besides, I don't know, food,
oil and
handcraft things.
Coffee, emeralds.
But the production, I mean, we don't have industrial production or something like that.
Right, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. And the only reason why Colombia is still a country is more or less drug trafficking.
Kind of failed state, like Somalia or
absolutely. And the problem is that the profits you are getting from it. For example, to produce 1 kilogram of cocaine costs about 500 to 600 euros. And 1 kilo of cocaine here in Europe is like 10,000 euros. Right. So if you see from 500 to 10,000, the profits are huge. And I think that's one of the only business giving that kind of profit. So it's our history.
It's also really sad actually when you are everywhere like outside from Colombia and you're Colombian and you know people, then the first thing is as you say, it's really like a joke, and it's Colombia, my uncle Pablo Escobar. I ordered some cocaine and
directly from him.
Arrived. So, and it's like every single time when I know people, it's really I'm the criminal drug dealer and for me it's really like, oh my Lord, how can you be so unrespectful? And
okay, I'm sorry, it was my 6th question.
I just want to say something because I think people see like the conflict and the problem of Colombia and drugs like very far away.
Right.
But I think, and that's what I always say in these kind of situations, yes, we are the producers. That's absolutely right. But you guys are the consumers.
Right. That's the point.
And that's the money, the bloody money coming from here and getting Colombia and supporting paramilitary forces, supporting inequality, supporting this eviction, land grabbing. I mean, everything is related to that, and that's because that's the reason why Europeans and Americans,
human trafficking,
are having some kind of responsibility for that. Because you cannot ignore that what you are consuming is paying our debts, the debts of our people, is paying the guns Spain, the corruption.
Yeah.
So if people really want to help, I would say, please stop consuming cocaine from Colombia because it's feeding our chaos. It's feeding our problematic.
Yeah.
And if you say you are a political person, and if you say you are an anarchist, and if you say you want to help somehow, and you consume cocaine, that it has to be clear that that's money supporting that in Colombia.
Right.
So we are the producers, we are the consumers.
Yeah, right.
In the end, there was some very clever person who once said, in order to stop the production of cocaine in Colombia, you would have to sue Americans' nose. Well, the only way. America's enormous cocaine nose. Also Europe.
Just as Europe, yeah.
Exactly. Other countries, Australia, Japan, Canada, they also imported tons of cocaine.
Yeah.
Now, regarding your question, shortly, like, drugs, in this case, the industry of cocaine export is, you could say, is all around the country. Actually, the whole region. It's not only Colombia. Colombia produces a lot of cocaine, but you get it exported through Venezuela, through Brazil, through any other country, Mexico nowadays. So in the end, drugs are always there, and drugs include the police. Once you have drugs, then you have the police.
Yeah, right.
Drugs are planted to surveillate any place they want.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you see people protesting on the streets is everyone. You see people who actually have been involved in criminal acts. I mean, people who, for example, street dealers or minor criminals.
Yeah.
You see them stop doing it. There's people who you got
Really?
interviews.
Okay.
People who've been involved in drug trafficking, maybe people who mobbed on the streets.
Yeah.
They're now involved in the protests or have been involved in the assemblies, in the community cooking, cleaning, for instance, the urban gardening. So this general strike, this national strike, has offered these people who are actually victims of the system, has offered them something new, something different to do, a different kind of opportunity to live. So in the end, the drug dealing and stuff is something that has been out because some people do profit from it. Some people just get some money for their living by selling 1 gram, 2 grams of cocaine or marijuana. But in the end, the people do not need the drug dealing. Nobody in the Colombian people is proud of it. Nobody in the Colombian people supports it in the end. Nobody is, as a comrade said, drug dealing, cocaine, whatever drug it is, actually brings surveillance, police, the military, repression, slavery, and death to us. So in the national strike, drug spin out. We're not exactly there, but we very much know those kind of things put people in danger. So it's been out. It's been taken out of the assemblies, of these political spaces.
Okay.
Drug dealing and the presence of drugs is to be held away. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. What do you think? How for us, the Colombian society is shaken because of the general strike, and what do you think? How long will this last, or how long? It's not that easy question. You can say we don't know, but
let's see what's gonna happen in the next vote this next year.
Yeah, I think next year there are presidential elections. And I think one of the most difficult tasks for the movements and for anarchist movements is, on the one side, try to canalize this whole energy and this whole protest to really do some change, but some political change from the ground. And I mean with that, because for example, and start to fall in. There are like there are moments like from emotional moments, but there are like not this kind of changes we want to see.
Right.
Yeah? And I think for on the one side for anarchist organizations is the task to canalize this whole energy and to continue organizing people to prepare people for a change.
Yeah.
And on the other side, like showing that the elections are not going to change a lot.
Okay, see, yeah.
Because it's like the political establishment.
Yeah.
And maybe we hope we are going to get a new president, a president who is not on the same side from the last 20, 30 years or more.
Yeah.
But the problem is the violence. We don't know how it's going to continue like this process, if there's going to be like some kind of violence against candidates, against people taking the streets. And that finally to change the political establishment from the inside is more or less impossible, because we know how how it works. And to change it from the inside is almost impossible.
Okay.
So I think the real task for anarchism in Colombia is like to canalize this huge energy and keep organizing people.
Right.
Yeah. But because of the repression, is a very difficult and dangerous task.
Yeah.
That's
the question.
Yeah, we got a question here. A few months ago in Germany, there was still a lot of reporting about the protests in Colombia. By now, I feel like that is not the case anymore. How do you expect the situation to develop? Do you think it does make a difference if there is reports about the protest in foreign media or not? That's a question also. You have good questions.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know. It would be nice to point that out, because as we were preparing to speak about these issues, we realized there's a lot of information, and informing yourself is living in the political world. If you tell your story, if you're able to tell the story that this is happening in that place, people would know. Sometimes it's very hard to let letting know much people about what is happening in certain areas of Colombia is very difficult, or any other country. But every part of the world, there is something going on. There's someone resisting. There's someone organizing. Now, definitely what gave the national strike a lot of power was information, the possibility of people to tell their story, to tell what is happening immediately around them. So that definitely made a difference in the sense of the fact that in Germany people are knowing about what's happening is because someone's telling the story. We got a platform to tell the story. As long as these platforms are shut off, or not necessarily shut off, but if the topic of these platforms, if they're replaced, it's very transcendental topics like some sort of a revolution of a social upstand, if they're replaced by any other news, right, then definitely we lose a lot. People lose a lot of moral. They lose the belief, the credibility, the social protest loses a lot. So definitely it has been, to me, it has been a very strategic movement from the different sources of information to replace the actions and the current organization processes that have been taking place since the past 4 or 5 months in Colombia, and replacing them with whatever trash you can watch on the internet, right? That has taken a lot of power. But in the end, we know, also regarding your question, kind of, this huge national strike is a response to a lot of pain, desperation, and I don't know, wrath that's been accumulated in people's hearts, in people's life stories. So there is always going to be resistance. There's always going to be organization, as long as this rage, as long as this wound is not being healed. And to my understanding, the only way to heal that wound is the struggle. We need to carry on the struggle. We need to carry on organizing. We need to carry on informing, communicating, and building everything we need up. You know.
Actually, our work these last months was exactly that, trying to be the voice of our people there, of our family and friends. And I got calls of friends that they told me, hey, please try to let the people know there what is going on here, desperate. So so it's for them was also really important that the world know what is happening in Colombia, and then the human rights institutions, the Office of what is the name of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. They start to make some investigations also to the last president from Colombia, Uribe, and NGOs, and like just the fact that the world is putting the eyes in Colombia, and are also actually also in economy, a lot of negotiations, like business are people doesn't trust anymore with like what is happening there, and they are not making any more investments. So they put it for the next year, or for like, so if Colombia have this pressure of, okay, shit, the world is knowing actually what is happening. So it's of course really important that the world knows what is happening in Colombian institutions.
I just want to add something. Of course, information is power. And we are like in a society based on information, most of them on online information. But I think this visibility my comrades are talking about, for me, what's very interesting, like to see on the international level, the support that Colombians have been given from abroad. Because I think in the last 20 years, a lot of people have left Colombia because of many reasons, because of violence, because of opportunities, and so on. But for me, what's very interesting and like reconforting to see people abroad going to embassies, protesting in front of embassies, organizing with other Colombians, to talk about the situation, to give some kind of visibility. And I think that's very important, because that spreads the information. The most of the information, for example, is in Spanish, and then when it goes abroad, the people who is talking other languages abroad is giving this information and giving accessibility to this information to other people. And I think that's very, very important, and that's a thing, an issue we are obliged to continue as Colombians abroad, because abroad we have the chance to protest and to participate more or less without the fear to be killed, without the fear to be like in the moment, I don't know, disappeared. We can use these democratic rights here to protest, and I think it's our task as Colombians, as anarchists, to give this information to other people. I think we have another 2 questions.
Do you know about protests and strikes that took place in the countryside in Colombia because of the tax reforms? I think most of the demonstrations were concentrated on bigger cities, especially Cali, but also others. So were there protest acts also besides the cities in the countryside? And if yes, were they different in the way or form compared to the cities? Actually, of course, the media or like the biggest or dangerous one or like the most chaotic ones were in the big cities, but of course in every, like in a lot of regions in Colombia there were also demonstrations. I come from a small city, and there it doesn't, like, you couldn't really find a lot of information in the media, of course, because it's not that, I don't know, huge, but still, it was in many other places, not just the big cities.
I think, yeah, of course. I mean, what my comrade said, I think the big cities, I always like the example of the protest, but the interesting part of this national strike is that it was actually national. I mean, that wasn't not just a name, but really in small towns where people protesting, blocking streets, stopping working, going outside and talking with the other people. And I think also at the beginning, or before the national strikes, there were also some regional strikes.
Before.
Oh, I see, and
okay.
one of the most important or more relevant was in Buenaventura. Buenaventura is one of the biggest port in Colombia. If you blockade Buenaventura, you are like blockading the whole country, because that's the way the whole goods and products are getting in and out. So if you are able to blockade the city and this port, you are able to blockade the whole country, and that happened. And that's really interesting, because the people in the regions and on rural areas are even in more danger than the people in the cities. Because you don't have the visibility there. You have maybe there are paramilitary groups maybe active in the area, or just the police, which is also the paramilitary group. So you are at risk, and you don't have like this protection of a huge city and the anonymity of a huge city. But it actually happened, is still going on, maybe not with this huge energy like at the beginning, but the people is mobilizing, and the important thing is that that's very, really from the bottom, like grassroots organization.
But Cali was the epicenter, or is the epicenter. After a few days of the protest, was already Cali one of the epicenter of the violence, also of the much. And I think was in this neighborhood that was much more desperation, was much more poorness.
I think Cali. I mean, the phenomenon of Cali is related to the history with the drug trafficking, to the history and the relation to Buenaventura, to the port also, because it's like the biggest city closest to the port, to Buenaventura, and also because of the racial issue in Cali. I mean, with racial issue, the huge part of the population in Cali is Afro-Colombian.
I see. Okay, I get it.
There are also some indigenous groups with presence in Cali, and that's like a confluence of conflicts. So from the racial issue to the paramilitary one to the drug dealing and so on. And I think that's the reason why Cali was like so important, and this explosion in the mobilization, that maybe my comrade is able to say more about it.
Was going to say, firstly, Cali is a city that was built by immigrants from the countryside, especially from all the western coast. Is it western?
Anyway.
Western coast, the western coast of the country. North coast, western coast of the country. Immigrants have been populating the city since beginning of the 20th century. But especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and even 60s, political violence threw people from the countryside to urban areas like Cali. So if you see what's the origin of the Black population in the city of Cali, you would find many people arrived to the city due to evictions, due to several types of conflict, whatever, drug dealing, whatever you want, name it, you name it. And that has made people, like, protests taking place in the city, they're actually rooted on the countryside. But in this case, in the case of this national strike since April 2021, you see strong mobilizations, massive mobilizations from people from the countryside to the cities. Not only in Cali, you would see that also in the Caribbean region, or even in the center of the country, and the region like south from Bogota. You would see people moving in the small cities and towns. You would see people there. The main difference was in cities like Cali, Pereira, even Armenia. You would find some, Bogota, Medellin, and like in the greatest cities, you would see very strong and very solid resistance. The first liners, for instance, you would see them appear in this urban context. In rural contexts, it would be rather not the case, or they were not so visible as such in the cities. But in the end, mobilization, organization, structure, assemblies, they were all taking place equally in not only in cities, also as well in the countryside, in rural contexts, right? That's why we speak of a national, still not national
Or general.
Yeah.
general strike, because it really involved many sides of a country.
We have other question.
Yeah.
Are there more ways how we can support the protest from over here in Europe?
Also, really nice question.
Yeah. This I think this is my last question. How can we support the uprising in Colombia?
Well, from Europe, I think, as I said, stop consuming cocaine. Talk with your friends about it. Stop supporting this death machine. Yeah, that's the first thing. I think get informed. Go beyond narcos. Go beyond this Hollywood shit. Go beyond this whole history. The elites are trying to selling you or selling us. And start to talk to people. If you find some Colombian on the streets, go to talk to him and ask how these people is feeling, and ask what they think about the situation and so on. I think one of the things, for at least from people abroad, is this feeling that we are also like unable to support the people there, and like this feeling we are like some kind of impotence about the situation. Exactly. Read about it. Yeah. Read about the history of Colombia and the responsibility from Europe and from Germany about the conflict, about the guns, German guns there in Colombia. The German guns is sold to the police and the military. If you see, stop supporting the political parties here in Europe, supporting that kind of things, and start asking politicians here in Europe why they doesn't express in some way about the situation in Colombia. And that's of course a political issue, because if you say Colombia is not a democracy but a failed state, of course we are opening gates, for example, to people asking for asylum here, opening gates for any kind of processes against gun producers here, and so on. And I think the last thing I'm going to say is consume critically. If you are, I don't know, if you are drinking coffee from Colombia, then maybe it's good to ask yourself in which conditions this coffee is going to be produced or has been produced. If you are turning your lights on, it could be possible that light is going to is from the coal from Colombia. So I think the most important thing is get informed and support the locals, the Colombians in Europe.
It's also for me like I don't know, last time I got a lot the question of, what are you gonna do after your studies? You wanna go back to Colombia? And I'm always like, wow. Well, emotionally, like just by myself, I just gonna take the next flight to Colombia back because I love to live there. I love
Family, friends, and so on.
everything there is amazing. I really feel me good there. But the question for me is in the end, I really want to do activism, and where I can do, where can I get more, or ¿cómo se dice tras conseguir?
Get.
How can I reach more, or where? Because, well, in Colombia, if the situation continues like this, there, of course, if I go there, it is a huge possibility that I'm gonna get killed, and maybe my family or my friends also. So for me, it's also important this call of, hey, I don't know, is the thing that makes me angry is that the people here in Europe or in North America doesn't really, not everyone, but a lot of the people here doesn't really realize how good, how much privilege and how good we are doing here. It's really crazy how good. And of course, I come from the other side, and I know that all this privilege that for us is normal is through the cost of the people there, of all these deals of cocaine, of coal, of so of course the government in Colombia is pretty corrupt and bad, but it's not the government of Colombia the only one who decides how is the situation in Colombia. So for me, it's really important that the people here also realize about it and start to maybe just to take one conflict in the world, just one, because it's, I don't know, for me, doesn't make much sense to get informed about every conflict in the world, and then I get depressive about it, and that's all. Just take one and sich dafür einsetzen and
get involved.
Yeah, get involved, do something, create collectives, get together, and I don't know, collect some donations and send it to the collectives there that they are financing. They're, I don't know, also connected with some social initiatives that they are working also with the people there. And it's really important to get connected and to get and to help the people there with making voice, consume critical, and financial help also. The people there needs a lot of financial help, and we were also doing it, like collecting donations and getting connected also with collectives from Colombia, but that they are working with indigenous or Bawan farmers or and helping the amazing ideas and social initiatives that is going out there, but they don't have the money to develop it quickly or faster than
Please don't get involved in this white savior role. You people, you are not going to save Colombia. You have responsibility, but you are not.
We can
going
support,
to
but we
exactly. So don't use this white savior, I don't know, role to try to change the world, because it's not like that. It's a very European colonialist way of thinking. So please don't do it.
You're damn right. You're damn right.
It's a matter of, I think the best way to help, not even to help, I'm not also quite sure about helping, but if you want support, I think the best, in my experience, be honest with yourself. like do the things that really call you, do the things that really be where you really want to be. So if you really want to be involved and interested in, for instance, solidarity with the people of Colombia or with any other place, make sure that you're doing whatever you can locally before you think of another country. I mean, of course, we need to, I like this phrase, think globally, act locally. I mean, of course, it's quite important to consider and to understand, for instance, where does our food come from? Where does the electricity come from? And most likely the answer will be from abroad, from colonized countries. So, for instance, for sure, being there, being aware of the world and how the world is connected is quite important. But firstly, I'd say the most important thing is take a look at what's happening around you, and where are you called? What are you called to do? Right? Study, learn about it, learn about history from here, from there. How is the world linked up? Coloniality, all these things will help us to come together in a sense, and to find the strategy, to find a way to speak to each other. I think that's plainly it. To speak to each other, speak to even to the people who show little interest in these things. Find a way to do it. Maybe it could be your family, it could be your best friends, it could be someone immediately around you. I think that's the best way to go. Apart from the things that were said here, if you're able to donate, do it. If you're able to get solidarity coffee grants, then do it. There are several other ways to help and to give a hand, to give assistance. But in the end, like the core of it is very much located in how are you doing what you can just immediately around you. And if you do what you want to, if you're doing what you want to do, or if it's plainly it's mainly an idea you're following, follow what you feel, follow what you want to do, and you would certainly find ways to do it around you. And that is more than enough, I'd say. And when the time comes to unite, you'll be prepared. Take my word, you'll be prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good last words. Yeah, good last words. Thank you for that you are in a small info shop doing this. Thank you really much. Very much.
Yeah, thank you for this possibility, for this space to talk about Colombia, and for the interest also in our country, in the situation in our country.
Yeah.
And yeah, always, if you want us here, you will get us here.
Okay, what about next week? No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you very much of the people.
Just if you have beer.
We do have beer. What do you think?
Yeah, no, thanks.
Let me switch to German. Das ist der erste Teil der dreiteiligen Reihe Global Anarchy. Der nächste Teil wird stattfinden am 12. September. Das ist, glaube ich, wieder ein Sonntag. Da werden wir dann mit Genossinnen und Genossen aus Brasilien sprechen. Ja, dazu seid ihr herzlich eingeladen. Ein kleiner Hinweis noch für den Dienstplan. Am 18.09. beginnt der Prozess gegen Lina, die Antifaschistin Lina und 3 andere in Leipzig, und es wird da eine Demonstration zu geben, und die Details könnt ihr dann bei uns auf der Telegram-Gruppe entnehmen. Soweit von uns. Vielen Dank, dass ihr da wart. Wir hoffen, dass ihr nächste Woche auch wieder dabei seid, und ich werde gerade darauf hingewiesen, dass der Incito-Geburtstag auch naht, unser erster Jahrestag. Dazu gibt es dann auch in Bälde mehr. Schön, dass ihr dabei wart. Bis bald.
Danke
Tschüss,
euch alle.
ciao.
War sehr schön.